Good afternoon, beautiful people. Good afternoon. I hope you all are doing well. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. I feel like I had some other stuff to say. I hope you're doing well. Hope you're protecting your mental, finding time for an emotional release valve, and continuing to strive to be beneficial. Welcome to Reading with Jam. I am Jam, also known as, or my name is Jamal Calpin. Reading with Jam is my opportunity as an actor, as a voice actor, to read some personal development content, books, whatever that I was personally going to read anyway to help me become a better person and not so terrible. um, Reading it, practicing it, but also trying to share it with you all too as I continue the journey. Along with being an actor and a voice actor, I like to create content to try to help Black men to escape and overcome gray mediocrity, which I think is a very, very devastating thing for us as Black men. It's just mediocrity is just not good, in my opinion. And I see that different from average. I think great mediocrity is you just living far, far below what God has called you to be, in your own personal life, in your relationships, in your work, and everything. You're just not living in vibrant excellence. We're called to shine our light and to be conduits of God's goodness for His glory and for the good of other people and for the deep joy that resides inside of us. When we're pursuing those things, that's what happens. We get that joy, when we're living that out. But anyways, reading with Jam is me reading books of things that I find interesting. And I'm trying to, like expand our knowledge on stuff because I understand we read books. I think Black men read books, but sometimes we may not read books that could be very, very challenging to us. So I want to read books that are challenging to me and that could be challenging and helpful to you as well. I'm doing my best, and I'm not, reading everything. I'm taking it one book at a time, but yeah, we're gonna read what we can. And if you ever have any recommendations of things for me to read on Reading with Jam, let me know. Uh, I'll see what I can do. I'll see what I can do. But we are now finishing Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown today. I believe this is the last chapter. She has some other stuff in the book, like the acknowledgments and, gratitude and all this stuff like that. But I'm not going to read that other stuff. I'm just going to read the meat and share that. So we're going to read the last chapter of the book, share some thoughts, and call it a day. And I think since what I'm going to do to help me keep reading these books as much as I can, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to take a week off of doing the Reading with Jam in preparation for the next book. The next book, I have something in mind. It's something I've thought about reading. So I'm going to read that, and then I think after that, I'm going to read All About Love. The next book I'm going to read isn't that long, so it shouldn't take that long, and then we can get into All About Love. But yeah, next week I know is a holiday, so I won't be here, not doing Reading with Jam at least, and because you should take the time if you have and you have the opportunity, whether it's family or your family, spend time with people, and do some reflection and rest and enjoy yourself. But today we are going to wrap up Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. We got 30 minutes on the clock. Let's get into it. Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. Cultivating meaningful connection. Theory. It is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data. Insensibly, one begins to twist facts to suit theories instead of theories to suit facts. Arthur Conan Doyle, A Scandal in Bohemia. I'll never forget the day when Dr. Paul Raffol, my epistemology professor, drew the circle of science on the board. Oh, here's the circle of science before I keep going. And it says circle of science. At the top, hypothesis or theory, and then goes to the right, deductive reasoning, comes to empirical observations, continues up on the left side to inductive reasoning, and it's a circle. So, sorry, pick up. Here we go. I'll never forget the day when Dr. Paul Raffal, My epist- epistemology professor drew the circle of science on the board. It was my first class in the social work doctoral program at the University of Houston, and seeing that circle on the board felt like a moment from a Dan Brown book. It was the PhD student's first clue to finding the inner sanctum. Dr. Rafal was one of the few faculty members that I continued to address as doctor, even after I was hired as a tenure track assistant professor and we became colleagues. He always wore a suit and tie with a coordinating U of H baseball cap, and he always had a twinkle in his eye when he talked about that circle. It's like he was thinking, "You have no idea what I'm talking about right now. Oh, but you will. All will be revealed." As a grounded theory researcher, I work up from the bottom of that circle, following an inductive approach in generating theories from mostly qualitative data. I'll occasionally use quantitative methods for something, but I love language, words, and story. The theories that I develop are then often tested using deductive and quantitative methods. Some old school deductive folks argue that their approach is the most valuable, but today there's a widely held belief that we need both. We should not test and build on theories that are just conjecture, especially when it comes to hypothesizing about underrepresented groups while knowing very little about their stories and lived experiences. Having an empirically based theory adds to the rigor of science. The value is in the full circle. P.S. I think the circle of science would be way more popular if we had an Elton John song like The Circle of Life. That's fair. The word theory is not as complicated as it sounds. We all have theories. For example, you probably have a theory about the traffic patterns by your house, or the reason one team at work is always late delivering projects, or why your parents get to the airport 6 hours before their flight departs. We theorize all day long. I think the best definition is from behavioral scientist Fred Kurlinger, another great teaching from Dr. Raffal's course. Kurlinger defines theory as a set of interrelated constructs, concepts, definitions, and propositions that present a systematic view of phenomena, specifying relations among variables, with the purpose of explaining and predicting the phenomena. If we break down your theory about the traffic patterns in your neighborhood, it will more than likely include propositions and concepts that come together to paint a picture of what's going on. For example, the number of cars at the high rise down the street, the line getting out of the grocery store, the need for a light at a busy intersection, the new school zone, etc. Theorizing is part of meaning making. It's how we explain the relationships between different variables. The only difference between our everyday theories about how things work and the inductive research I do is that my theories are based on observations or data that we methodically collect and analyze. We observe the traffic, count the cars, pull data from the city, time the lights, review accident reports, interview neighbors, and generate a theory or a hypothesis. If we do this, then, or these changes will have a positive effect on. Once the theory is out in the world, my research colleagues may come behind me and test that theory deductively by temporarily setting up stop signs or traffic lights and analyzing the outcome. Part of the beauty of the circle of science is its iterative nature. Researchers test and retest from the bottom up and from the top down. The findings evolve, and our level of understanding keeps getting closer and closer to truth. It may seem as if the findings are changing or the initial findings were wrong, but often it is the case that new data has given us a more accurate understanding of the data that came before. This, my friends, is the circle of science. By the way, I'm totally asking Elton John and Brandy Carlisle to do a duet on this. TikTok, we're coming for you. Near enemies. Now that I've forced you through a primer on theory building, I'm going to share a new theory with you that's the culmination of my work since the beginning. And I do mean the very start. My dissertation is actually on connection. This new work is a theory on cultivating meaningful connection. While this new theory draws heavily on all my previous work, there was something missing, a piece that I couldn't quite figure out until I started this research. The elusive piece was rediscovering the Buddhist concept of near enemies. Studying near enemies took me down the research rabbit hole, and the more I read, the more I realized that for years I've underestimated this concept's power and contribution to explaining human behavior. I explained it in chapter 7, where we talk about pity being the near enemy of compassion. But before we get to the new theory, I want to dig deeper. Several writers and researchers whose work I admire and turn to often, including Kristen Neff, Chris Germer, and Jack Kornfield, write about near enemies. To get our heads and hearts around this concept, I thought I'd share a different definition and a couple of examples. In an incredibly timely and powerful article, The Near and Far Enemies of Fierce Compassion, Chris Germer writes, near enemies are states that appear similar to the desired quality, but actually undermine it. Far enemies are the opposite of what we are trying to achieve. For example, a near enemy of loving kindness is sentimentality. Similar, but different. A far enemy of loving kindness is ill will, the opposite of loving kindness. Similarly, a near enemy of compassion is pity, and a far enemy is cruelty. Without the language of near and far enemies, and without the tools of emotional granularity and self awareness, the difference between how we want to show up and the near enemies of these practices feels nuanced. But this type of nuance predicts the difference between wholeheartedness and brokenheartedness. Jack Hornfield explains that near enemies may seem like the qualities that we believe are important, and may even be mistaken for them, but they are different and often undermine our practices. He writes, the near enemies depict how spirituality can be misunderstood or misused to separate us from life. When I read that last sentence, I had to break it down and reread it about 20 times. The near enemies depict how spirituality can be misunderstood or misused to separate us from life. I define spirituality as the deeply held belief that we are inextricably connected to each other by something greater than ourselves. I have friends who are atheists who every day practice inextricable connection. Wait, yeah, inextricable connection. They hurt when others hurt, and they know that none of us are free until all of us are free. I have friends who talk endlessly about their religion and wear scripture on their t shirts, yet demonstrate no connection to anyone's suffering, but their own, and maybe that of the people in their immediate circle. I make this point because we're not talking about religion here. We're talking about the irrepressible human spirit. When I look at Cornfield's sentence and think about my 20 plus years of research on connection, my translation is on the surface, the near enemies of emotions or experiences might look and even feel like connection, but ultimately, they drive us to be disconnected from ourselves and from each other. Without awareness, near enemies become the practices that fuel separation, rather than practices that reinforce the inextricable connection of all people. This is huge. To really get this concept in our bones, I want to share two more examples with you from Jack Kornfield. On love, he writes, the near enemy of love is attachment. Attachment masquerades as love. It says, I will love this person because I need something from them. Or, I'll love you if you love me back. I'll love you, but only if you will be the way I want. This isn't the fullness of love. Instead, there is attachment. There is clinging and fear. True love allows, honors, and appreciates. Attachment grasps, demands, needs, and aims to possess. On equanimity, anonymity, on equanimity, he writes, the near enemy of equanimity is indifference or callousness. We may appear serene if we say, I'm not attached. It doesn't matter what happens anyway, because it's all transitory. We feel a certain peaceful relief because we withdraw from experience and from the energies of life. But indifference is based on fear. True equanimity is not a withdrawal, it is a balanced engagement with all aspects of life. It is opening to the whole of life with composure and ease of mind, accepting the beautiful and terrifying nature of all things. Yeah, I was struggling with that word. um, sorry, I wanted to highlight something. Hold up, kind of this whole section. Let me just bookmark it. All right, let's keep going. I needed the concept of near enemies because when it comes to cultivating meaningful connection, the far enemies, the real opposites, are not what get in the way most of the time. They're easy to recognize. We don't get tricked into believing that everything is okay. They are upfront with their disconnection. It's the near enemies of connection, the imposters that look and feel like cultivating closeness, that sabotage relationships and leave us feeling alone and in pain. And because they're so stealthy, we often internalize the pain and think that something is wrong with us. Near enemies can feel like manipulation and even gaslighting. Of course, the far enemies destroy connection too, but you see them coming. Oh no. Thank you for being here, Tea Time Beauty. I appreciate it. And thank you all for those on Instagram too. I appreciate it. Thank you for being here as I read this book. Here we go. Let's keep going. Next section. A grounded theory on cultivating meaningful connection. Cultivating meaningful connection is a daring and vulnerable practice that requires grounded confidence, the courage to walk alongside others, and story stewardship. I'm not going to walk you through every element of the theory. Most are self explanatory now that we have the language. But I do want to give you an overview and introduce you to some new concepts. As we talk about the theory, you'll see that each of the three major categories that support cultivating meaningful connection has its own near and far enemies, as does each of the skill sets that support those categories. Developing grounded confidence. I first introduced the term grounded confidence in Dare to Lead. The core learning in Dare to Lead is that it's not fear that gets in the way of courage, it's armor, how we self protect when we feel uncertain or fearful. Our armoring, our armoring behaviors keep us from showing up in ways that are aligned with our values. As we learn to recognize and remove our armor, we replace it with grounded confidence. The concept was in its infancy when I wrote about it several years ago. It only included three properties: the abilities to rumble with vulnerability, stay curious, and practice new skills. What you see now is a much fuller concept with more properties, and my guess is that we'll continue to work on this for years to come. Okay, there's a diagram here. A grounded theory on cultivating meaningful connection by Brene Brown. Okay, all the stuff she just said, but here's a, I don't know if that's going to show up. Here's a picture of it. And so it starts off a grounded theory on cultivating meaningful connection. First box, developing grounded confidence. Second box, practicing the courage to walk alongside. Third box, practicing story stewardship. And at the bottom, it says connection is the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. That's kind of deep. Okay, oh, there's another graph. Okay. Uh Skill set one. Oh, there are lots of graphs. Oh. Um uh I'm just gonna go to the text. Because these graphs, they're nice, but they're small. And I don't know if that's gonna translate well in me reading. So I'm gonna skip those. Sorry. But yes, we're reading Alice of the Heart by Brene Brown. It's good. This is the last chapter of the book, I believe. So we'll be wrapping it up today. Okay. So Dare to Lead is a good read. It sounds like it. It sounds like it. I I definitely know I've been recommended that book, so I'll have to check it out. It sounds really good though. All right, here we go. Developing grounded confidence is driven by a commitment to learning and improving. Its near enemy is knowing and proving. Hmm. In our culture, we're quick to mistake knowing and proving for confidence when they're actually a function of low self worth. Oh boy. Fragile self worth is the far enemy of grounded confidence. A fragile self worth drives us to self protect at all costs. Man, she's saying some heavy stuff here. Hold up. All right. All right, let's keep going. The last skill under this category is feeling embodied and connected to self. We don't talk enough about the importance of embodiment and what happens to us when we're disconnected from our physical selves. In his book, The Body Keeps the Score, trauma researcher Bessel van der Kolk writes, trauma victims cannot recover until they become familiar with and befriend the sensations in their bodies. Being frightened means that you live in a body that is always on guard. Angry people live in angry bodies. The bodies of child abuse victims are tense and defensive until they find a way to relax and feel safe. In order to change, people need to become aware of their sensations and the way that their bodies interact with the world around them. Physical self-awareness is the first step in releasing the tyranny of the past. Man, okay. Hey, Prince Petty. Thank you for the love. I appreciate it. Thank you. Van der Kolk goes on to explain that the mind needs to be re educated to feel physical sensations, and the body needs to be helped to tolerate and enjoy the comforts of touch. Individuals who lack emotional awareness are able, with practice, to connect their physical sensations to psychological events. Then they can slowly reconnect with themselves. Grounded confidence is driven by learning and curiosity, even about our own bodies. For many of us, myself included, it's easier to live in our heads and be completely disconnected from our bodies, but there's a cost: insomnia, injuries, exhaustion, depression, anxiety. The body has powerful ways to get our attention. Prentice Hemphill is a writer, an embodiment facilitator, a political organizer, and a therapist. They are the founder and director of the Embodiment Institute and the Black Embodiment Initiative. I've learned so much from Prentice about embodiment. I think their definitions will breathe some life into these words that you see on the model. Prentice defines embodiment as the awareness of our body's sensations, habits, and the beliefs that inform them. Embodiment requires the ability to feel and allow the body's emotions. This embodied awareness is necessary to realign what we do with what we believe. They define disembodiment as an unawareness, repression, or denial of our sensations and emotions, and or privileging our thinking over our feeling. Ooh. Disembodiment often leads to an incongruence between the actions we take in the world and the beliefs that we hold. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. Okay. I, I got to come back to that. Okay. This piece about values misalignment makes sense because for me, the best indicator light around being out of value, being out of values is my body. I can't quite describe it, but I feel out of sorts, like you feel when you catch every red light on a long downtown street. My body is out of flow. Prentice writes, the habits that become embodied in us are the ones that we practice the most often. And whether we are aware of it or not, we are always practicing something. When we are disembodied or disconnected from our own feelings and sensations, it's easy to become habituated to practices that we don't believe in or value. We become what we do, even when those things are outside of who we want to be. Our bodies are our teachers and the messengers who call our attention to what we're absorbing and becoming. This is why we have to learn how to listen, and this is why grounded confidence requires embodiment. Practicing the courage to walk alongside. The second major category is practicing the courage to walk alongside. One of the great challenges in grounded theory is naming categories and properties in a way that accurately reflects the data and resonates with people's lived experiences. For this category, I found myself asking, what does it mean to be other focused? To use language in the service of connecting, to be compassionate, empathic, and non judgmental. As soon as I started thinking about this question, I was transported back to my dissertation. The name of the theory that emerged from my dissertation is accompanar, which means to accompany in Spanish. My dissertation is a study on how helping professionals build and maintain connection with the people they serve. The approach that best reflected what I learned from that data was the accompaniment movement, an organizing and social justice approach that comes out of liberation theology that comes out of liberation theology activism in Latin America. The work is a commitment to be with people, not pushing them from behind or leading them from the front, but walking with them in solidarity. Being other focused, using language in the service of connecting, practicing compassion, empathy, and non judgment aren't fully in line with all of the tenets of accompaniment, but are fully consistent with practicing the courage to walk alongside. The near enemy of walking alongside is controlling the path. Sometimes it can look and feel like someone is with us, but really, they're trying to control either us or the outcome. I think most of us do this more than we'd like to admit. For example, my child comes home and is upset because they got in trouble at school. They were talking while the teacher was talking, and they were told that their behavior was disrespectful. I'm trying to be with them in this experience, but I quickly find myself worried about what the teacher will think of my child, and worse, what will they think of me as a parent? So now, rather than being with my child, I'm trying to control how this is going to go. Forget about asking what happened or checking in to see what they're feeling. I want to be with you in this turns into you need to email your teacher and apologize right this minute. What were you thinking? I once heard Anne Lamott say, help is the sunny side of control. Yes, in yikes. Okay. All of us who were raised taking care of other people and trying to manage environments can default to wanting to control the path, regardless of our great intentions, especially when it's in everyone's best interest. The question is always, whose best interest are you protecting? Walking alongside is other focused. Control is self focused. Insert stressed emoji with flat panicked grin. I can't do it. I can't do it. We also see, okay, sorry. We also see controlling the path in larger cultural contexts. For example, politicians who see people suffering and rather than actually walking alongside them, make people feel like they're understood and they're not alone, while actually leveraging and exploiting their emotion for political gain and influence. I see your struggles and your pain. You don't deserve it. Here's who's to blame, and here's how I can help you and make them pay. This near enemy is so seductive that it is often as dangerous as the far enemy, walking away. Power is another element of walking alongside, and it's not one we talk about often enough. I think it's because we have a weird negative reaction to the word power, even though everyone will tell you that powerlessness is one of the most painful human experiences. My favorite definition of power comes from Martin Luther King Jr. In a 1968 speech given to striking sanitation workers in Memphis, Reverend King defined power as the ability to achieve purpose and effect change. The definition does not make the nature of power inherently good or bad, which aligns with what I've learned in my work. What makes power dangerous is how it's used. Power over is dangerous because it's using disproportional influence to achieve gain, even when that diminishes the agency and or dignity of others. In their publication, Making Change Happen, Power, Just Associates, a global, interdisciplinary network of activists, organizers, educators, and scholars, defines three variations of power within the context of social justice and activism. They are equally helpful when we think about walking alongside people. Power with is based on mutual support, solidarity, collaboration, and recognition and respect for differences. Power to is based on the belief that each individual has the power to make a difference. Power within is defined by an ability to recognize differences and respect others, grounded in a strong foundation of self worth and self knowledge. When we operate from a place of power within, we feel comfortable challenging assumptions and long held beliefs, pushing against the status quo and asking if there aren't other ways to achieve the highest common good. Walking away, the far enemy of walking alongside, includes both discounting and dominating behaviors such as ignoring, dismissing, power over, and building walls, literally and figuratively. If you combine the entire column of near enemy and far enemy from this category, you'll get an interesting tool for assessing politics. The combination of control and power over masquerading as connection is especially destructive. Practicing story stewardship. I'm going to start this section by acknowledging that I've been wrong about something for years. For 2 decades, I've said we need to understand emotion so we can recognize it in ourselves and others. Excuse me. Without exaggeration, I've said this thousands of times and I've heard it from other researchers at least that much. Well, let me go on the record right now. I no longer believe that we can recognize emotion in other people, regardless of how well we understand human emotion and experience or how much language we have. Why have I stopped believing that we can recognize emotion in other people? Two reasons. Number one, too many emotions and experiences present the exact same way. There's no way to know through observation if your tears come from grief, despair, hopelessness, or resentment, just to name a few. Absolutely no way. And two, while research shows that there are some universal facial expressions for a small number of emotions, how we express what we're feeling and experiencing can be as unique as we are. So, how do we know what other people are feeling? We ask them. It's only then that we are able to connect with a grounded confidence to engage in the courage to walk alongside. When they tell us what they're feeling, what happened, what they fear or desire, we listen and we become trusted stewards of their stories. Story stewardship means honoring the sacred nature of story, the ones we share and the ones we hear, and knowing that we've been entrusted with something valuable, or that we have something valuable that we should treat with respect and care. We are good stewards of the stories we tell by trusting them to people who have earned the right to hear them, and telling them only when we are ready. We are good stewards of the stories we hear by listening, being curious, affirming, and believing people when they tell us how they experienced something. The near enemy of practicing story stewardship is performing connection while driving disconnection. Performative connection means that we're acting interested or invested, but there's no more going sorry, but there is more going on under the surface that's really driving disconnection and separation. Oh, hit the wrong thing. Hold on. I'm trying to put a bookmark. All right. Continuing. The issues that most of us struggle with are being the knower, advice giving, and problem solving. Problem solving is tough because some people do want help. The best story stewardship in these moments is just to say, I'm grateful that you're sharing this with me. What does support look like? I can listen and be with you. I can help problem solve or whatever else you need. You tell me. The greatest threat to story stewardship is the two near enemies of building narrative trust: narrative takeover and narrative tap out. Rather than building trust by acknowledging, affirming, and believing, we shut people down when we experience discomfort or disinterest, or when we take over the narrative and make it about us or our perception of what happened. There are examples of both of these in the graphic comic strip that Gavin developed for us, which you'll find in a few pages. No, my alarm's going off. All right. It's the last chapter. I'm gonna just finish it. The 30 minutes is up, but I'm just gonna finish this chapter because so we can finish the book. All right. Narrative tap outs can range from subtle disinterest to complete shutdowns. If we had thought bubbles that say, "This is too uncomfortable," or "I don't care enough about you to care," or "I don't care enough about you to care about this," or "I can't take this on right now." If the reason we're tapping out is the latter, it's so much better to say it's so much better to say that than to diminish someone's story. It sounds weird, but we can tap out of sharing our own stories too. Often, this is about a lack of grounded confidence that our stories matter or a lack of self trust about when and how we share them. Tapping out of stewarding someone's story can feel like betrayal, and tapping out of sharing our own story feels like betraying ourselves. Yeah. Whew. Okay. Narrative takeover is a huge problem in our world. It impacts one on one conversations and cultural conversations. Rather than being good stewards of a story, we hijack the story and center ourselves. That centering takes many different shapes, including shifting the focus to us, questioning or not believing what someone is sharing because it's different than our lived experience, or diminishing the importance of an experience because it makes us feel uncomfortable or, worse, complicit. When we reject the truth of someone's story, the ultimate failure of story stewardship, it's often because we've stealthily centered ourselves in their story, and the narrative takeover is about protecting our ego, behavior, or privilege. The less diverse our lived experiences, the more likely we are to find ourselves struggling with narrative takeover or a narrative tap out. Hmm. A cultural example of narrative takeover is the Black Lives Matter movement. This is a life affirming accountability movement to call attention to the violence being perpetrated against Black people. But rather than listening, learning, and believing the stories of injustice, systemic racism, and pain, groups of white people centered themselves with All Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. There was never a narrative of white lives and police lives don't matter in this movement. This was an attempt to once again decenter Black lives and take over the narrative. Same here. Same here. I need to be a better story steward. Yeah, there's some heavy. This is some good stuff. All right. Sorry again for the Instagram folks. If you want to see the additional comments that people are contributing to the reading, you got to come over to you got to come over to the YouTube channel. So and it's the beneficial black man. All right, here we go. Like empathy, story stewardship is not walking in someone else's shoes. It's being curious and building narrative trust as they tell you about the experience of being in their own shoes. It's about believing people when they tell you what an experience meant to them. The far enemy of narrative trust is fueling narrative distrust and diminishing the humanity of others and ourselves. Why ourselves? Because when we are reckless with people's stories, we diminish our own humanity. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to read that paragraph again. Like empathy, story stewardship is not walking in someone else's shoes. It's being curious and building narrative trust as they tell you about the experience of being in their own shoes. It's about believing people when they tell you what an experience meant to them. The far enemy of narrative trust is fueling narrative distrust and diminishing the humanity of others and ourselves. Why ourselves? Because when we are reckless with people's stories, we diminish our own humanity. Man, the following comic is based on a role play that Aiko, Bethia, and I did on the Dare to Lead podcast. Okay. Oh man, this comic is long. All right, well, this must be important, so let's do it. Cultivating, yeah, cultivating meaningful connection. And here's the comic. So let's see if we can get through this. You're not late. It's all good. Thank you for joining us, The Dark Knight. I appreciate you. Thank you. All right. Cultivating meaningful connection. Let's see how can I do this. How'd your presentation go? It went okay. Why just okay? I stayed up all night planning for it. Planning for it. This was my big moment and it just didn't feel right. Narrative tap out. I'm sure it was great. Hey, what time is our next meeting? So that's what's happening in this thing. Oh, okay, the next one. Cultivating meaningful connection. Say more. Help me understand what didn't feel right. You really worked hard putting it together. So what felt weird? I'm glad that you asked me that. It almost felt like I was talking to myself. No one was even looking at me or making eye contact. I was like, I could have been in the room by myself. In a little picture. I don't know how this is going to show up. I'm sorry, guys. Down here at the bottom. The next one, narrative tap out. Yeah, sometimes we feel like that when we give talks. So I'll see you at noon for the next meeting. Dang. Cultivating meaningful connection. Wait, are you saying that you gave this presentation that you've been working on for 2 months and you felt invisible in there? Yes, that is exactly the word I would use, invisible. Um, oh, and she goes on to say, I know that, of course, nobody in the room looks like me, but even as I was making the presentation, no one asked me the questions. They looked over at Brad instead of me, Brad. Afterwards, when people said, good job, they were saying it into the space, into each other. So I was really deflated. Picture of her feeling deflated. Narrative takeover. Well, it sounds like you might be a little sensitive. Do you think that you're exaggerating? I'm sure you did a great job. Even I get sensitive after a big moment. Uh, okay. I, I'm going to skip the next comment because I just want to get to the text. Let's see. Tea Time says, I try to learn from situations where I was presented with something I didn't have the insightful awareness yet on how to show up how others. Oh yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I think books like this and then taking the time to be self-reflective is very, very important. So I mean, even taking that action to be self-reflective and consider what was happening at the time is a big, big thing because a lot of people don't do that. Don't do that. So I mean, I think that's great. All right, let's see. The Kindle says there's 1 minute left in this chapter. Let's see how long that takes. All right. Language and meaningful connection. As you review the model, you'll see that knowing and applying the language of human experience and emotion is a key property of all of the major categories that support meaningful connection. That's how we ended up here, together, sharing this book. When this emerged from the data, I thought, damn, I can't write a book on meaningful connection without including some kind of glossary or compendium of emotion experience words. It was and remains weirdly shocking to me that access to and application of language are central to grounded confidence, walking alongside one another in story stewardship. I wouldn't have been surprised to see language emerge as core to one of these, but that it's central to all three speaks to its power. As you can see in the graphic, the near enemy of knowing and applying language is shaping emotion and experience to fit what we know. We take nuanced experiences like despair or hopelessness and force them into whatever language we have, maybe sadness or anger. But this leaves us far less capable of sharing what we're experiencing, getting help, or moving through our experiences productively. It's a near enemy because we may be talking about our feelings or sharing them, but we can't get to healing because we're limited by our language. The far enemy is acting out, shutting down, or giving up. No access to language means we're in pain. We feel alone and we can't articulate what's happening. In the introduction, I gave an example of trying to tell a doctor about an excruciating pain in your shoulder while your mouth is taped and your hands are tied behind your back. The limits of not being able to explain, wait, sorry, the limits of not being able to explain result in an unbearable level of frustration. Oof. All right. Atlas of the Heart. While I experienced a lot of tough moments growing up, there were also countless gifts. It sometimes feels like it has to be one or the other, but as we learned in this work, both things can be true and often are true. One of the most valuable gifts in my life was from my mom. She taught us to never look away from pain. The lesson was simple and clear. Don't look away, don't look down, don't pretend not to see hurt. Look people in the eye, even when their pain is overwhelming. And when you're hurting and in pain, find the people who can look you in the eye. We need to know we're not alone, especially when we're hurting. Okay, I'm trying to take notes of stuff that I want to come back and say because I want to just finish the book and then I'll try to say some stuff. Uh, Okay. Even in my 50s, I find myself wrestling with the same questions that left me confused as a kid. Why do we cause each other so much pain? And why do we turn away from hurt when the only way to the other side of struggle is through it? I don't know why it's so hard to understand. I've been known to run from vulnerability. I've been known to run from vulnerability like someone is chasing me. Granted, not very often anymore. It just takes so much more energy and creates so much more emotional churn than having a seat and asking hurt or uncertainty to pull up a chair. Doing this research and writing this book has taught me that our emotions and experiences are layers of biology, biography, behavior, and backstory. Every single day, our feelings and experiences show up in our bodies. They're shaped by where we come from and how we were raised. They drive how we show up, and each feeling has its own unique backstory. Understanding these emotions and experiences is our life's work. The more we learn, the deeper we can continue to explore. I've also learned something that has changed how I move through my life on a daily basis. Our connection with others can only be as deep as our connection with ourselves. If I don't know and understand who I am and what I need, want, and believe, I can't share myself with you. I need to be connected to myself and my own body and learning what makes me work. This is how I start to develop the grounded confidence I need to move through the world and cultivate meaningful connection with others. Before this work, I didn't give enough importance to spending time and energy connecting to myself. I made that optional if I had anything left after connecting with others. It wasn't working, and now I know why. Okay, sorry. I'm trying to highlight some stuff. Okay. In this life, we will know and bear witness to incredible sorrow and anguish, and we will experience breathless love and joy. There will be boring days and exciting moments, low grade disappointment and seething anger, wonder, and confusion. Excuse me. The wild and ever changing nature of emotions and experiences leaves our hearts stretched, marked, and strong, worn, and willing. That's beautiful. My hope is that we find that solid ground within us, that shore that offers safe harbor when we're feeling untethered and adrift. The more confident we are about being able to navigate to that place, the more daring our adventures, and the more connected we are to ourselves and each other. The real gift of learning language, practicing this work, and cultivating meaningful connection is being able to go anywhere without the fear of getting lost. Even when we have no idea where we are or where we're going, with the right map, we can find our way back to our heart and to our truest self. Wow. I'm getting a, oh wait, hold on. I gotta call him back. All right, sorry. Getting a phone call. Oh man. 5 stars. 5 stars. So when you get to the end of a book in a Kindle, you have to it asks for you to give it a review. Oh man. I think all right. That was a really good book. And I would definitely recommend anybody, if you don't want to just go back and listen to me read through it, get a copy for yourself. Again, Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. All right, I'm gonna try to remember the things that I wanted to touch on real quick because there were some heavy hitting ones in here, uh, and I don't want to be on too much longer. So, uh, okay, I'll start with this one. What she said about disembodiment, man. Um, they define disembodiment as an unawareness, repression, or denial of our sensations and emotions, and or privileging our thinking over our feeling. Disembodiment often leads to an incongruence between the actions we take in the world and the beliefs that we hold. What comes to mind for me with this whole disembodiment thing and the way that she defines it, it makes me think about all the stuff I've heard men say and the stuff that I've been taught that men should do, which a big part of it is like you just need to be logical. You just need to be logical. Like everything just needs to be like computed computation, forget feelings, forget emotions and all that stuff. And just based off of that definition, disembodiment often leads to wait, before that, part privileging our thinking over our feeling. I don't it's That's not laughter as in like, oh, this is crazy, it's silly. It's just like, wow, this is wild that this concept of, particularly for men, kind of we're being forced to be like, oh, you don't need to feel things. Everything just needs to kind of fit into place. It has to compute, it has to work. The numbers have to get together, and that's all you need to worry about. That's all you need to focus on. But it really does create disembodiment. It really does. And I think this kind of lines up with how Jason Wilson, the author of The Battle Cry, describes it. Uh, a lot of men putting themselves in emotional incarceration. Like you are detaching yourself, like parts of yourself, and putting a huge part of yourself, your emotions, your feeling, great part of your soul into prison because that's what you believe a man is supposed to do. That's what masculinity is, and so on and so forth. But it's just encouraging disembodiment. It's encouraging incongruity, or I would say cognitive dissonance within somebody. And I feel so bad for myself, but I feel so bad for men who have been taught this, and it's handicapping us. It's handicapping our experience in life to not fully embrace and it be attached to all of who we are because we're afraid of somebody saying that we're soft, or because we're sensitive, or because we're intelligent, or because we are certain things that, I did a video where a lot of things for men in general, but definitely young black boys, like you want to avoid anything that could come off as gay. Like, but those basic things like your emotions and your feelings is part of your embodiment. But this belief, whether you want to call it patriarchy, toxic masculinity, or whatever, is dismembering us. And of course, that makes it bad for us, but then it makes it bad for those we have to relate to, women and children. Like it's bad. It's bad. And I mean, I really like the way that I like that definition. I like that she pointed that out. There was some other good stuff in here. I probably should have highlighted more stuff. Uh, I like the thing about tapping out of this sentence. Tapping out of stewarding someone's story can feel like betrayal, and tapping out of sharing our own story feels like betraying ourselves. Um, I think that's heavy because again, a lot of times, at least for me, um, I have ignored or pushed aside my story or my feelings or thoughts um, for the comfort of others at times. Um, as an example, say I was hurt by somebody. Instead of voicing that, instead of communicating that, I allow them to do that without consequence, without boundaries, and without repercussions. And that's betraying me. It's not, I'm not protecting myself. And when you don't do that, that also puts you in a position to not protect the other people around you well. And I regret that. There have definitely been times where I haven't stood up for myself and stood up for people I've cared about. And because I didn't like own up to my story that like, I'm angry, you piss me off. Like what you're doing is wrong. And I need to confront you about it. But I would like give the benefit of the doubt, or I would be afraid of actually confronting that person because I don't know what the outcome is going to be, or I froze up, like all those things. But hearing that, knowing that, yeah, you can be betraying other people, but also betraying yourself. And that, again, her reading it and seeing it and getting a better understanding of it, uh, is heavy, but it's helpful. It's heavy, but it's helpful. Um, this is another good line. Oh, hold on. From Tea Time Beauty, such an important point. Emotions are so sacred, and to be disconnected to the only body we get in this life can be so scary. Facts. Absolutely. Like, I'm sorry. I just think about all this stuff that we are taught in this culture and in this society, things that we're really hyper focused on and that we're told that we need to focus on are things that need to be important to us. And very rarely is it about just us, like our well being, our health, like about just being whole. It's very outward focused a lot of times. Get this, get that, get this, get that, uh, buy this or whatever. You get these things and that will make you whole. But at no point is there really any work saying like, oh, let's connect the dots and let's put the things together and cultivate the soul that's within inside of you. And yeah, it is scary. And I think it puts a lot of us in a really, really unhealthy and bad place. The other line that I sentenced, thank you for that comment. The other sentence that I highlighted was the less diverse our lived experiences, the more likely we are to find ourselves struggling with a narrative takeover or narrative tap out. I think that's so true. Like for me, I'm grateful uh, that where I grew up in the DMV in PG County, like I have been able to experience a wide variety of different people from different ethnic backgrounds, different classes, all kinds of different stuff. And I think that's so important and it's so helpful. Uh, because if you're really if everyone you're around is exactly the same as you don't get challenged. You don't really learn anything. You don't get an opportunity to grow. And so I'm grateful that I've had that experience. And I'm also grateful that I've found places online where I can hear a variety of different opinions and thoughts and experiences and stuff. And sometimes those thoughts and those experiences are challenging, but I'd rather be growing and learning and developing as a person than staying the same and not changing, you know? Let's see. I think there was one other thing, and then I'm gonna wrap this up. Oh, okay. Something that really hit for me was, I guess, the thing that was taught to Brene Brown by her mother to never look away from pain. And the saying, what she said, don't look away, don't look down, don't pretend not to see hurt. Look people in the eye, even when their pain is overwhelming. And when you're hurting and in pain, find the people who can look you in the eye. We need to know we're not alone, especially when we're hurting. This is so challenging to me. So challenging to me in like confronting. And I feel really bad for the people I have not looked in the eye when they were saying and expressing their experiences to me. I feel really bad for that. And on a grander scale, I feel really bad for what comes to mind for me. I feel really bad for women and more particularly Black women who continue to share their stories and continue to share their experiences, but people won't look them in the eye. And that can be like, digitally online or whatever, but like you hear these stories, you hear these experiences, whether it's on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, whatever, in books, like you hear these experiences. And then for me, since I am a Black man, there are Black men who are like, that ain't real. You're lying. That's not true. Check the numbers. Where are the facts? What's the statistics? That's not real. That can't be whatever, whatever. And it's just like somebody's looking at you, telling you, this is what happened to me. This is what's happening to me. Here's the experience. And just like, nope, I can't see it. I don't, I don't understand. That can't be real. This is my experience over here. What you're saying is anecdotal, but like it's so one, yes, of course it's dismissive, but it really is. It's really cowardly to not be able to look at pain in the face, in the eye, and it's hard. It's hard, but it's necessary. We need to do that. We need to do that. We need to have that connection with each other too, like I know for some people, and that it has been me, and I'm trying to work through that. Even seeing people cry can be very challenging. And sure, it can be uncomfortable, but sometimes you need to see it. Not to say that you just walk around and watch people crying all day, but like you need to be able to look at what's happening and face it so that you can experience all of it. And I think unless you do have like, is it sociopathic or psychopathic, whatever, like a serious like mental illness, I don't think as normal or decent human beings, you can't look at tears, you can't look at pain, you can't look at anger, you can't look at these things that may be challenging and not be affected by it. And oftentimes, yeah, we'd rather see smiles and joy and laughter and all this stuff. But sometimes you got to see the grief. You got to see the mourning, the mourning. Um, I think I can't remember the scripture right now, but it's in Proverbs or Ecclesiastes, and either probably Solomon, but Solomon, King Solomon is saying that like there's wisdom in the wisdom in the company of mourning or grief or something like that. And I think it's true. Like there's a lot that you can learn there, but it can be hard, especially especially if people are expressing their pain and frustration and you're the one that caused it. Like, ah, anyways, I don't know. I don't know. That right there was really challenging for me. And I know that's something that I have to work on. Um, yeah. Okay. Enough by MNT. This chapter was so humbling. Honestly, I had to reach out and apologize to a couple of people for not knowing how to properly hold space. That's so true. Like, I like, thank you for sharing this. I appreciate it. Um, Even with the like, to me, especially with the holding space, it sounds like using her language or whatever. The story stewardship, being able to make space for people and respect and hear what they're experiencing. And I think it can be really, really difficult to do that. Um, but I'm grateful that it's something that we can all grow on, to get better at. Enough by MNT says, I'm so grateful for the example she gave so I could visualize how to be better. Likewise, it's the same for me. Like this is definitely been helpful. Like I'm probably gonna have to read this book again. I probably won't do a reading with Jam of it again, but there are definitely some really, really good nuggets in here and things to like really work on and work through. Um, yeah, yeah. Tea Time Beauty says, being able to show the love of Christ, even in moments of grief and transformation, is the most honorable pain I'm willing to face. Wow, that's deep. That's deep. That's good. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Tea Time Beauty. Yeah, yeah, that's good. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining me for another reading with Jam. We're gonna wrap this up. This was the last chapter of Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. Um, if you haven't been here, I think this is part 16. So if you want to go back and watch the other parts, they're on my YouTube channel or on my Instagram. The YouTube channel is The Beneficial Black Man. Instagram is Jamal Calpin. Thank you all for joining me. I'm going to be taking a break next week. After that, I have another book I'm going to read, and then but good advice from my wife. She has encouraged me to read All About Love by Bell Hooks. So after this next book, because this next book is a lot shorter, I think, than All About Love, then I'm going to read All About Love. So All About Love is going to be the next, I guess, popular book that I'm going to read. That book is good, and there's some challenging things in there too. But thank you all for joining me, and I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Until next time, continue to protect your mental, find time for an emotional release valve, and continue to strive to become beneficial. There's greatness in all of you, greatness in all of you. So, continue to be great if you want. I mean, and it's the weekend, I guess. So rest, relax, enjoy yourselves. And I will talk to you all soon. Thank you again. And I'll talk to you all later. Peace.